you had such a history with country music. And when I mean country music, I mean like real country music from the 50s, 60s, 70s. Well, 50s you were still a kid, but 60s, 70s, 80s, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like I got to tell all the people about these people you've met.
Okay.
Cuz it's a long list, and somewhere along the line they're going to relate to someone on this list and be like, "He met this person? Don Miller knew this person?"
Yes.
And you could be like, "Well, hell yes, I knew her.
Yeah.
Shook her hand
Worked with
and
them.
gave her a hug." Right?
We was on the package show together.
All right, so my all-time favorite is at the top of the list. Elvis, Dolly Parton, Clint Eastwood, who isn't truly a musician, but if you don't know him, you need to throw some water on your head. Waylon Jennings, Merle Haggard, Loretta Lynn, George Jones, George Strait, Buford Pusser,
Right.
who was not a musician,
Exactly right.
but he was one hell of a sheriff.
Sheriff of McNairy County.
That's right, and they did a movie about him called
That's
Walking
right.
Tall. Well,
That's
they
right.
did 3 movies.
Well, the original was
Walking Tall.
Walking Tall.
Yeah.
Right.
With Joe Don Baker.
Right.
Reba McEntire. You had a lot of experience with her.
Sure.
Red Steagall, who I didn't know who the hell
Lots of
he was
experience.
until I met you. I'd never heard of him. Johnny Cash. Everyone knows
Right.
Johnny. Gene Autry, famous country singer. Old Conway Twitty. His real name was like Bob Johnson, but Conway Twitty. Tammy Wynette. Mo Bandy. Harlan Howard, who was
Right.
one of Waylon's favorite songwriters.
And Harlan Howard is one of the only people in the world that had 15 songs on the top 40 chart.
Mickey Gilley, who just
New Mickey.
he passed away recently. Now Willie Nelson, everybody knows Willie Nelson. Gary Stewart,
Yes.
who I only found out about maybe 3 or 4 years ago, but he was good. He was a
Yes.
good singer. But nonetheless, he's a legend in Texas.
That's
a lot of
right.
people know about him.
That's right.
Okay, another famous guy, very famous guy who just passed away, Kenny Rogers.
Yes.
My second all-time favorite behind Waylon in the country music realm is Don Williams.
Don Williams.
He was the gentle giant of country music.
Yes. Very gentle he was.
Yeah, he just seems like a good
Yes,
man.
he was.
Mel Tillis.
New male. In fact, the first job I had, went to work for mail.
What's that line? What's that line from Smokey and the Bandit 2 where they drive through his amusement park?
We're closed.
I told you we're closed.
Yeah.
He could sing, but he couldn't talk.
That's right.
All right, Charlie Pride. He was the black guy.
Yes. Charlie Pratt.
Farron Young, Tanya Tucker,
Yes.
and she sang that song Delta Dawn.
Right.
All right.
Exactly.
Chet Atkins, who, I mean, he was
Notorious
a legend.
legend.
Producer, guitarist.
Was, yes.
He never sang, though, right? He just
No,
loved to play.
He played. He could sing.
Could he sing?
Yeah, but normally he didn't.
Yeah.
He just let the guitar do its thing.
Oh, well, he did well with that.
Yes, very well. And he was part of the $1 Million Band. And the group of the $1 Million Band was Chet Atkins, Boots Randolph, Floyd Kramer, Charlie McCoy, which is a harmonica player, and Roy Clark.
Oh, really?
And Danny Davis, who was...
He was the producer?
No, Danny Davis had the Nashville Brass.
Well, he wound up producing some of Waylon's albums.
Danny Davis?
Yeah.
I don't doubt
and
that.
he and Waylon didn't get along.
I don't doubt that. Because Danny Davis was a great musician.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they formed a band called the $1 Million Band.
Gotcha. Barbara Mandrell.
Played the golf tournament with Barbara Mandrell in '76 in Montgomery, Alabama.
Mr. Roy Acuff.
He was a
Wabash Cannonball himself.
And ran the Grand Ole Opry.
Yeah, until he died,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay, and the next guy you already mentioned, Roy Clark, who was
Right.
like a virtuoso.
Oh, yes.
He was one of the best guitar players of all times. Okay, Bob Wills, And if you don't know who Bob Wills is, you probably never heard Waylon, because he did that song "Bob Wills is Still the King."
You're right.
Which
Bob
is a
Wilson
big hit.
had a group called the Texas Playboys.
That's right. And a different Tommy Duncan
Right.
used to sing for
Right.
him.
Exactly.
Not the one we mentioned earlier. Well, that was Johnny Duncan.
Johnny.
My bad. Okay.
Now, a lot of people Johnny had a brother named Tommy, but it wasn't
the same.
Tommy.
Okay. All right. Gotcha. Okay. Porter Wagner. He had that TV show in the 60s.
Yes.
Boots Randolph, who you mentioned earlier, he
Sure.
was a great saxophone
Oh,
player.
yeah.
And he did
Yakety Sax.
Yakety Sax, and he also did Reconsider Baby
Yes.
with Elvis.
Yes, he did.
And
Yes, he
Elvis
did.
really liked him.
Yeah. Which he was also a part of the $1 Million Band.
Who, Elvis?
Boots Randolph.
Oh, but yeah, you said that right. Yeah. So Snake Reynolds, who you mentioned, he passed away
Great
last
producer.
year.
Great producer and an engineer for Columbia Records.
CBS.
He had been. There's nobody that he hadn't engineered their music. Merle Haggard and all of them. George Jones.
So he was a producer or an engineer?
He was an engineer.
Okay, so he's behind the
He's
console there.
Yes.
Mixing and saying, let's
Yes,
take another take
yes.
there.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, an actor who I only recently actually started to like, because I always thought he was a dick when I was a kid, but Burt Reynolds.
Yes. Bert's comical.
I never liked him as a kid, but as I've gotten older, I see the humor and the comedy in his stuff, and he's a likable guy. James Garner.
Yes.
I've started to actually like his stuff. Okay, Jimmy Bowen.
Jimmy Bowen was a producer that came out of California.
But he went over to Nashville, right?
And he came to Nashville, and he's what changed the mono industry over to digital. He brought California to Nashville, basically.
A part of the $1 Million Quartet, Mr. Carl Perkins.
That's right. That's right.
Ronnie Millsap, the blind pianist,
Yes,
who was a huge hit in the 70s and 80s.
exactly. And he came out of Memphis, out of Sun Studios.
He did too?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now, who is Sonny Throckmorton? Was he a guitar
Sonny
player?
Throckmorton is a great writer
A writer,
who's
okay.
written. He's up there with Harlan Howard.
Okay, he's that good.
Yes.
Okay.
He had written songs for everybody. The Oak Ridge Boys, the Statler Brothers, most everybody that was anybody in that.
Did he write Elvira?
I'm not quite sure whether he did or not, but I wouldn't doubt it.
Giddy up, boom, ba.
Yes. He wrote so many songs that I'd have to just take.
Well, maybe somebody
hour?
listening would be like, "Oh, I know Sonny
Yes.
Throckmorton."
Yes.
All right, a guy who I know.
Last Cheater's Waltz is one of the biggest songs.
What was
that
it called?
he'd written. Last Cheater's Waltz.
That sounds like a horrible waltz.
Well, it was a great song for T.G. Shepherd.
Okay. Gordon Lightfoot. And then the other one I was going to ask you about, obviously Hank Williams died when you were just a child.
Yes.
Without a D, a child.
Yes.
But did you know his son,
I knew Hank.
Hank Williams
Jr.
Jr.?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yep. Met Hank a time or two
Before he fell off the mountain?
after he fell off. the
After, okay.
Yes.
Well, Don, that's a pretty friggin' extensive list. I mean, we're talking at least 55 to 60 famous musicians, actors, artists, producers, writers. So I thought, after you and I became friends and you were telling me all these stories, I thought to myself, well, some bitch.
Some bitch.
Some bitch, this feller's got some entertaining past. Because it's a lot more interesting than mine. So, I just
Well,
really
it depends
wanted
on which
to.
way you're looking at it. I think your life's pretty interesting myself.
Well, it is now because we're talking. So, I figured we just kind of start at square one. And this is the first time we're doing this, so we're kind of new to it both. But,
And I'm scared to death of a Mac.
are you?
Yeah.
Well,
But I'll live through it.
just look me in the eyes.
All right.
Look deeply into my eyes. That'll calm you down. So, I figured we'd
We'll
start.
get through it.
So you had a really interesting childhood, and it was
I'm glad you thought so.
well, I'll tell you one thing, Don. It was a lot more nuanced and intriguing than mine. And we were talking the other day about it. Maybe we could just kind of go back over it. So I was shocked to find out that Don Miller with the country accent is from Los Angeles, California.
I was born in L.A. Not that I'm proud of it.
That's right. Well, it can't do much about that where
That's
you're
right.
from.
That's right. It was Mom and Dad's fault.
What took your parents out there to begin with, though? Because you said your dad was from Ohio.
Yes, they had met in making airplane parts for McDonnell Douglas.
Oh, like for World War II?
Yes, yes.
So they were out there to support the war effort.
Right, exactly.
Really?
So
and that's how they
where
met and got married?
Yeah.
No
Yep.
kidding.
Yep.
So your mom was like Rosie the Riveter?
Well, she done something in the airline instruction, but I don't know exactly what.
Yeah.
I never did get into that because I never was in an airplane, so
But where was she born again?
in Tennessee.
Okay. But you said both your grandparents were all from
All from Tennessee.
So
Yes.
so that's interesting. That's cool. So your roots actually tie back to building bombers for World War II.
World War II. Yeah.
So you popped out in 47?
March
So-
13th, 1947.
So
1:30 a.m. in the morning. So Mom
you even
says.
know the time?
I'm just telling what Mom said.
Okay, so World War II is pretty much over because it ended in like June of 45.
45, I think.
So we're talking, a year and a half after that. And your dad had switched over to becoming what was his job? He was already working on the railroad out there?
Yeah, he went to work for the railroad after they left the airplane.
After World War II.
industry. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, I'm not quite sure what railroad company he worked for there, but that's what he's doing. He was a brakeman.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay. Gotcha.
Not quite sure what a brakeman is.
Well, they were on the back of the train,
Yes.
and they turned those wheels that used to be on the top of the freight cars.
Got you.
Because that was back in the day before they had pneumatic braking systems.
Okay.
So
So he. Had
I'm into old school railroad stuff.
So he had the responsibility of stopping things, right?
Well, he'd be in the caboose,
Okay.
and the caboose man would be looking with binoculars to get they would look at the guy in the front, and he would signal when to apply the dynamic braking.
Okay.
Because the engines back then, unlike today, where they're essentially just massive
Right.
generators.
Right.
And if you turn the train's momentum into powering the generator, you can slow the train down. Well, back then you had a massive firebox,
Right.
or you had a diesel. So, but anyways, yeah. So that's cool.
Well, that's interesting.
So he was out there, and then you said you were just a child when you moved out to
We moved,
desert.
Yes, we moved into Death Valley.
Death
California.
Valley.
Yeah, and I was 4.
Do you remember anything about that?
I do. I remember us kids playing with donkey turds.
Donkey urine?
Donkey turds. We would go up in the mines. They had a lot of mines, gold mines.
Gold mines?
Yeah, were
in Death
closed.
Valley?
Uh-huh. They were closed, and the donkeys would use them for shade. So their droppings, they'd leave there. So us boys would have a pitching contest
Oh my God!
with donkey yarn.
Pitching shit.
Yeah. Literally. So when you say you're talking shit,
Don used to pitch shit.
yeah, we'd throw it, and we'd use it kind of like the rotten egg style. If you hit him, it's
Oh, you were throwing it at your friends.
sure. Yeah.
Oh, okay. You weren't trying to hit a target or
No,
anything.
no,
Oh,
we're just throwing it at each other.
okay.
And-
So you matured quickly, is what you're
well,
saying.
right.
Yeah.
Between that and the Rattlers, Sidewinders.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
That was in there. And there's an old prospector that lived right down a couple, 3 houses from us. So he'd watch us. We'd go up in the mines. He'd come up there with his little stick, telling us, "Y'all need to get out of here.
Get out of this here mine."
These damn snakes will just eat you up. And your mama would be so mad." Well, not only would Mama be mad, we'd probably be mad too. Because those sidewinders, you could see the sand move,
Oh yeah.
but you couldn't see the snake. So that was fascinating.
Yeah. That's something.
And then I remember my brother got stung with a black scorpion, which is deadly, and he'd put his foot in his shoe.
And it was in the shoe?
It was in the shoe. And he went to screaming because the hospital's miles away. So the old prospector came down there and sliced the foot and got the poison out. So
Sounds like this old prospector.
he's pretty ingenious. Yeah,
Yeah.
he was. Yeah.
How did you get water out there? I mean, they didn't have
There's a
plumbing, did they?
spring. Yeah, there's one spring that it was in the city of Trona. Now it's larger than it, but there was one spring there, and we got our water from that spring.
How long were you in Death Valley?
Well, let's see. I was 4 when we moved there, so probably a year and a half.
Okay, so you hadn't even really started school
No,
appreciably
I started school in Tennessee.
in Tennessee.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
and that's where we're going to pretend that your timeline began.
Okay.
All right,
All right, that's good.
in God's country,
Yeah, in God's country.
East Tennessee. You grew up
Middle
out.
Tennessee.
Oh, Middle Tennessee, outside of Lebanon. Did you say?
No, it's in Cookville. It's right in the heart of the Upper Cumberland Mountain Range.
Okay, on the north side of the state.
Yes.
Okay,
Well, kind of mid.
where the
middle of the
interstate
state.
where the interstate goes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interstate 40 goes right through there.
Gotcha. Well, I've driven through it, but I probably didn't know that was your
Yeah.
what, Coogland,
Cookville.
Cookville.
Cookeville.
Oh, Cookville. Okay.
Cookville.
All right.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So what took
It's
Daddy
just a
back to
job.
Cookville? What was it?
It wasn't Dad. We left Dad in Trona.
Oh, he stayed behind.
He stayed behind, and us family, Mom and her 4 children at the time moved back to Tennessee and moved in with her dad, which is my granddad.
What was the impetus for that? Him being abusive, or he couldn't keep a job, or what was it?
Well, he was in trouble with the law at that particular point.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you said he killed some. He killed him.
He killed somebody.
He killed him.
Well,
Possibly.
possibly. That's
not
the
sure.
story I know.
Right.
But I'm not quite sure. You know how things get twisted. I'm not old enough to remember exactly what took place at that particular time. I do remember that it was a couple of years before he got back to Tennessee.
What was he? And he was pissed when he came back.
He might have been inhabited.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So your mom just wanted to get away and have a better
Yes.
life.
Yeah.
And so her dad said, "Bring the kids out here. I got
Yeah.
this dairy farm."
Yes, he had a dairy farm, and at that particular time, they was building a new house when we moved in, but we moved into a log cabin, which was the original house on the home place.
Was that the one that they found covered with the vines?
No, that's our house, so we moved in from Granddaddy's. We left Granddad's and went to that house.
Okay.
So, but it took a while to get that kind of situated because it was covered with trees and vines and limbs and poison ivy, and the roof was kind of falling in. It needs some scotch work and that kind of stuff. So, no windows. So we just moved into there after we left Granddad's. When Dad came from California back there.
Now, it's your mom's dad that was named Homer.
Homer.
And
Right.
he was he was your
He was-
surrogate father figure.
Yes,
Yeah, right.
yes.
Okay.
He was a stabilizer for the whole family.
So he had that dairy farm.
Yes.
And he was born there and he died there, right? He was born on that farm and he died on that farm?
No, he bought the farm right after World War One. He gave 3 cents an acre.
3 cents.
Yeah. And in 3 or 4 years, they traded the cash for the payment. So the paperwork reads that Homer Carr paid 1 calf for the price of the property. And that went towards the amount that he owed for that year. And I don't remember exactly what he had to pay a year, but that cash pretty much covered it.
So that little town, Cookville, was there a railroad there?
There was.
So did he
There was.
sell his milk?
He did sell
like
it.
through the railroad? Like
No, he sold it to a pasteurizing company that would come around and pick up the barrels of milk that he milked, and then he'd set them out on the. We had a spring, and he'd put the milk cans in the spring, and they would keep the milk cool until the milkman came and picked them up and took them to the pasteurizing plant.
Hmm. So he had a decent income
Oh, yeah.
compared to most, right?
Not only that, but he was a well-known carpenter there in that country.
Because that old boy, he lived through the Depression.
Yes. Yeah. He was a well-known carpenter, and he had his own children that helped him through that process. So people would come to him to build him a house, and he'd go mark the wood, mark the timber on stump. They called it stump timber. So he would mark it, and then in the wintertime they'd cut it, and then he would take it to the sawmill and get it cut. And then he would stack the lumber, and then the next year he might start your home.
He might start your home.
Mm-hmm.
So he had. Where did he learn to become a tradesman, like a carpenter?
His dad before him was a carpenter. So it was a long assembly line of carpenters in that family.
Gotcha. Yeah, I got an uncle in Canada who's a carpenter.
Yeah.
And there's not much he can't do.
That's right. And that's what Granddad was.
Yeah.
So when he built your home, he wanted everything right. So he'd slate the timber off of your land, and his boys would cut it. And then when we came along, we would cut it because they was all gone and off on their own at that time. So when we moved in with Granddad, as far as he's concerned, he had raised his family. So you boys are going to take over where my boys left off. So
Well, we're jumping the gun because that's a few years later.
do what?
We're jumping the gun on that because you said that's a few years down the road.
Yes.
We got to talk about your daddy coming back.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Because
we can talk about that.
You're like 6.5, 7 now,
Yes,
and you're kind of happy out there.
I am.
Things are tranquil, and your
yes.
mom's doing good. You
Right.
said she started. What was she doing? She was ironing shirts or something.
Yeah,
Or?
she was ironing for people outside the house, like people that worked in factories and that kind of stuff needed their laundry done. So Mom would wash and iron for them.
Now, did she ever remarry?
No, never.
She was always just Well, I guess she was still technically married, right?
Well, she was at that particular time. Yeah,
Although your daddy would have said otherwise.
probably.
Okay, so and she was self-sufficient. She's raising 4 kids
Right, with the
And-
help of Granddad.
with the help of her dad, and then all of a sudden, your dad comes back out of nowhere,
Right.
unannounced.
He shows up.
Y'all are totally shocked,
Yes.
and he just strolls onto the property one day.
Well, I don't remember exactly what happened in this particular case, but I remember we had just left Granddaddy's and moved into this little house that Mom had found when she was picking blackberries. So she had her own place, and we was out of Granddaddy's house. And I don't know exactly. Back then, we didn't have telephones, so maybe a letter that she got in the mail or something stating the fact that he is coming in. So anyway, she warned us.
Oh joy!
Yeah. She told us, your dad's coming home. So, you're going to have to help me get the house all cleaned up and fixed up. So us kids that did that. And then it was a wreck, even though it's cleaned up, We had, for God's sakes, we had dirt floors. How do you sweep a dirt floor, right? But Mom she would put cornmeal down on the dirt, and then that kept the dust down.
Mm.
And then we'd sweep the cornmeal up and carry the remains out and dump it in some kind of hole outside. And the house was clean, but we had no running water unless you wanted to run the spring and get it, So it was a
Do you have an
spring.
outhouse?
We did have an outhouse. Yeah. We had 2 rooms and a bath instead of 2 rooms and a bath. So we had a little outhouse that
How did you bathe?
in a tub.
A number
A
what?
number 2 tub.
Number
wash
2.
Tub, right?
A wash tub, right?
Yes.
With an R.
Yes,
A wash.
Wash. His daddy would call it whoosh. It's a whoosh
A
tub.
whoosh tub.
So, I don't think we was really clean.
You're still dirty, Don.
Because everybody, us 3 boys, used the same water.
Oh.
In the
Well, was it a fight to see who went first?
always.
Oh my God.
Oh. So, at least
sounds
we had
awful.
we had most of the scum off.
Oh God. But the third guy had to wear it all. Ugh.
But we got by. We managed.
So
None of us died with any kind of disease.
no electricity, right?
No.
Wood burning stove?
Lantern, the wood burning stove, and a wood cook stove.
So what'd you do for fun as a kid?
Well, usually we shot marbles with each other.
Really?
With a slingshot, or acorns, we had our little wooden toys that we played with, corn cob fights and that kind of stuff. To where if you got well with one of them wet corn cobs, you knew it.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
Well,
you got to tell me. You told me yesterday, but you got to, for the benefit of the people listening, when you went over to your aunt's for the first time and saw Elvis on the Ed Sullivan Show, because that was a moment in history, and you were there.
Oh yeah, I was right there. We had no TV, so TV was a glamorous thing. Matter of fact, there was 2 TVs in the whole community. My granddad's sister and her husband had a TV, and there was a George Hitchcock that lived in that community that had a TV. And George was into wrestling.
Mm.
So he sold tickets in his living room so you could come and watch wrestling matches on a Saturday night.
Now, that's illegal, is it not, Don?
Well, in that particular time, it was, he made out with it, but you would buy a seat in George's house for the wrestling match, and he would charge you $0.25 to watch the wrestling on Saturday night in his living room. And they were probably 30, 35 people in his living room.
And so you often gave him $0.25 to go watch?
No. I wasn't into wrestling. Me and my brothers done that enough, so we didn't have to go see it.
Gotcha.
We could do it. But my Aunt Lee, she had one. So I was over there on a Sunday afternoon, which I wasn't supposed to be there. But I was up at Aunt Lee's.
This is 1956 now.
Somewhere in that area.
Yeah, well, it was.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you were, we're talking 9 years old.
Yes. And I was with my cousin, Royce, and he played guitar. So I loved to hang out with Royce because Royce had this awesome guitar and he knew how to play it. So music was my thing. So I thought, I'm just.
He turned you on to it. He was your first inspiration.
Yes, he was.
Your cousin?
He was. Yes, he was. And anyway, during that process while I was up there, Aunt Lee was watching the Ed Sullivan Show. And she hollered at us because we was in the back room. She said, "There's a new artist coming on. You guys need to come in here and watch him." So, me and Royce.
Had you heard of him by name yet?
No, hadn't heard of him. So anyway, me and Royce goes into the living room, and Ed Sullivan is just introducing him.
We got a really big show.
Really big show.
Really
big
show
show tonight.
Yeah.
So Ed Sullivan was introducing him, and they gave him a upper view of Elvis. And ironically enough, Royce looked a lot like Elvis, black-headed and had his sideburns way down to here at that time. So anyway, he could relate to Elvis in the way Elvis felt. So Aunt Lee said, "Well, you boys just sit down and watch this with us." So we got along just fine until they showed Elvis shaking his leg.
Mm-hmm.
When they done that, she shut the TV off and told us, she said, "Y'all need to go on back in there and play guitar."
And then she kept watching.
And I suppose she did. We don't know. But we just done what was told. So we went back. And then shortly after that, we began to hear Elvis on You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog and all these things on the radio. So Ed Sullivan introduced Elvis to a lot of us folks in Tennessee that had never heard of him.
Even though he was living in Memphis.
Yes, yes.
You'd think
But
he
you
would
got
have
to
been.
know the part of the country that I was from, Grand Ole Opry is about the only thing you got,
Yeah.
unless you had a television. So we knew nothing about the outside world other than what we saw.
Well, I
At that
still think
particular
that's
time.
pretty neat, Don, that you actually saw.
I saw the first.
Although I think
interview.
he did. I think he did 2 or 3 shows with Ed Sullivan.
We never looked at him as a sex symbol.
No, he was just a
We just thought,
different
man,
feller who loved music.
Yeah, that would be an awesome thing to be in his shoes and be able to exploit what he's going through.
I wish you would have had the gumption to speak to him when you got to hang out with him in the late 70s, but that's okay. We'll get to that later.
But
Nonetheless, you shook his hand,
I did.
so
did.
that's pretty
I did.
special.
Yes.
Now we got to go back. So you met your cousin,
Right.
and he inspired you because he
Yes.
was good at the guitar.
Yes.
And then somebody bought you a rifle or something?
Yeah. When you was 13, the tradition in the family was you got a gun. So on your 13th birthday, if you was a boy, you was expecting a gun. So you go hunt, and then that way you could put food on the table, right? So I wasn't a hunter, I wasn't a killer. So I decided, well, I'd go fishing, and down the road from me was a place called Caney Creek. And Caney Creek was full of what we call rockfish, rock bass. So we'd go down there and fish, and then we'd take them back to the house, clean them, and Grandma'd fry them up. We'd have fish supper. But the trick to the thing was, when you went down to Caney Creek, you went by a bootlegger's house, right? His name was Charlie Daniels. Not the singer, Charlie Daniels,
Right.
but a bootlegger, Charlie.
This was Chuck Daniels.
Yeah, we can call him Chuck, Charles, or whatever. But anyway, Charlie had traded some whiskey for a guitar and had set this guitar on the front porch. And I was anxiously wanting that guitar because I needed a guitar. Royce had one and I wanted one. So I get my gun on my 13th birthday. So the first thing I think is I'm going to go down and see if I can't trade that guitar for this gun, or trade my gun for that guitar. So I get down there and hadn't shot the gun.
But didn't you say your grandpa saw you leaving first and was like, "Where you going with that gun? Didn't
Going-
somebody
yeah.
see you?"
Yeah, he did. He said, "Where are you going with that gun?" I said, "I'm going down to the creek." So he said, "Well, okay." So I was 13. That was my gun, so I could pretty much go hunting, right? So as far as he thought, I was going hunting. Well, I headed out for Charlie's house to trade that gun for that guitar. So when I got there, Charlie came out on the porch, and I said, "Charlie, what do you want for that gun, for that guitar?" He said, "Want $5. Well, $5 to me was like 500. So I said, "How would you trade?" He said, "What do you got to trade, boy?" And I said, "I've got a brand new gun. I'll trade you for that shotgun." He said, "Homer know you're doing this?" I said, "I'm not going to tell Homer if you're not going to tell Homer. So Homer don't need to know about it unless you want to tell him. But I don't want to tell him. I'd like to have that guitar." So Charlie takes my gun, goes out back, shoots it, comes back to the front porch, and he said, "In order to make this right, I need to give you $5. And then we just trade. It was a little Stevens over and under 410, which is worth a lot of money now, but back then it was worth $5 to me. So I traded for the guitar. But I couldn't take the guitar to the house, so I had to hide it underneath the hay.
But you got to
In
tell
the
him
barn.
why.
Because Granddad didn't like music, period. He didn't want you to be a part of that.
He never sang or
No whistling, no
no
humming,
whistling even.
no humming, no whistling, none of that.
Hated music.
Well, I don't know whether he hated it or not, but he didn't like it.
Evidently.
He didn't like for you to do it, especially. So Anyway, I had the guitar in the barn, and it probably had a couple of strings on it, maybe 3.
3 out of 6.
Yes, right. But I made use of them.
So were you a natural when you picked it up? You figured
No.
out chords and stuff?
Oh, no, no.
Did you
I
even know
had
how to
no-
tune it, or?
No, I had no earthly idea. I knew that I had a guitar, and I was one of the proudest suckers in the country. So I had a guitar. I didn't care whether it had strings on it or knobs. It didn't matter. I had a guitar. So I kept it hid out in the barn, and I'd use those strings to plunk on. Because I didn't know where even to go get any strings. You probably had to go to Nashville at that time to buy strings.
Or like a hardware store,
Right.
maybe. Or,
Maybe
no, who
somewhere.
knows?
Maybe some pawn shop or something might have strings, but I wasn't aware of them because I'd never been in a pawn shop. But I had the knowledge to know that Royce knew where they were. So when it came time for me to let the family know I had a guitar, then I'd ask Royce, where do you go get strings? And then I'd probably had him to tune it, right? Then I'd have had
But that day never came.
that never happened. Never happened.
Because you only had that thing for what, a few weeks, you said?
Yeah, about 3 or 4 weeks, 5 weeks maybe. And I was up there picking on him one day, and it was raining, and the barn roof was metal, so I didn't hear Granddad come in, and I got caught with it. So he made me bring it to the house, and when I took it to the house, he busted it. A bunch of pieces and threw it in the fireplace, and I was crawling all over the floor trying to save what parts I could, you know. But I do remember the green and purple flames that the wood made.
From like the glue and the resin.
Right, I guess. But
So he threw it in that wood burning stove?
no, in the fireplace.
Oh,
Which
in the
was open
fireplace.
fireplace.
Okay.
He busted it up in the floor with his foot.
So, and he was swearing at you? What did he say to you?
You don't need this. There's no need for you to ever have it. It's going to take you to bad places, and you're going to be just like your daddy. As he is throwing the pieces into the fireplace.
So he clearly never condoned his daughter marrying your dad.
No. He hated that.
So he was probably taking out
His
some
spite
frustrations on your dad being a deadbeat
right.
on you for
Right.
wanting to play a guitar.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you suffered the consequence of that.
But it never stopped me. I decided that, okay, if I can't pick, I can write. So that's when I started keeping a little notebook. in
That's
my
when you
pocket.
started songwriting.
Yes, shortly after that.
You know, it's funny, Don. Not that I mean to regress your timeline against Elvis or anything, but I've read more about him than pretty much any other figure in history. And so his dad dissuaded Elvis from playing the guitar.
Really?
Yeah. Now, when he was, I think he was like 9 or 10, his mom took him to a hardware store, and she was going to buy him a gun, a BB gun.
Wow.
And
So we're reversed.
yeah, and so she couldn't afford the BB gun, and the guy at the hardware store said, "Well, for $2 less, you can have this guitar." So that's how Elvis got a guitar.
Oh, wow.
But
Well, bless his heart, he got to keep his.
he got to play it. But his dad said to him when he became he won a talent show when he was 9, and he used to play at his high school and stuff, and won a couple of talent shows. And so when he graduated high school, his dad said to him, "You need to make up your mind about being a musician or driving a truck. I never did meet a musician who was worth a damn."
I think that's what Granddad thought.
And then Elvis turned out to be the
One
the
of the
inflection point of
Yes,
history.
yes. The king.
But that seems hilarious to me that back then people thought anyone who wanted to be a musician was just an absolute jackass.
Well, the only time, in our part of the country, looking back at it, Johnny asked me one time, he said, "Do you think that your granddad was really against that? Or he really thought that if he broke that guitar, if you really had the desire to be in the industry?"
I don't think your granddaddy was that profound. I don't think he was thinking in 3-dimensional chess. His grandson. I think he probably thought it was the fucking devil's instrument and I'm going to burn this thing.
Well, he did that.
But it
It
did
became-
have the effect of inspiring you.
Yes, it did.
Motivated you.
It did. It motivated me.
And
It
so we
stood-
gotta tell him about that song you wrote about it,
Well, sure.
called
It's
the
box.
The Box.
And that came from Duncan. When as many years as I had worked for Johnny, he knew my childhood history, and he knew what I'd gone through my entire childhood. And he looked at me one day and he said, "You shouldn't even be in this business, according to your granddad. So here you are. I think you need to write a song about that."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Who in the hell would want to hear it?" And he says, "You might be surprised. You just might be surprised. So why don't you write a song about that?" And this went on for 7, 8, 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd keep asking me, "You got that song done yet? You got that song done yet?" So before he passed, and this was 2004, 2005, somewhere in that era. Anyway, I'd finished it, and I took it down to him. Now, I've been with the guy all those years, never seen a tear in my entire life until he read what I didn't sing it to him. I just handed him the paper it was written on, and he read the lyrics. And he called Connie, she is over at the sink, and he called Connie, and he said, "Connie, you need to read this," and passed it to her. So he said, "Make me a promise. Don't leave it in a drawer. Do something with this." So I recorded it, and it's called The Box.
We'll make sure we add that to the Don's album Spotlight podcast, because that is a good song. I do like that one.
Good.
You've played it a few times. Okay, so another thing you've told me that I thought was super interesting. So now you've gone from 13. Let's fast forward to when you're of driving age.
Of driving age?
And you chose to.
I didn't have a choice.
You chose to indulge in some contraband, the conveyance of contraband
You're
alcohol.
talking about moonshine.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes.
Well, I really didn't have a choice, Scott. It was.
Well, were you working, doing other things
I
at the
was.
time?
I was working for Acme Boot Company,
Okay.
and we was making boots, and I was on the third shift because I was still living at Granddad's, and I was milking morning and night. So the third shift started. I could go in at 6 o'clock, which was after milking time, and then I'd get off at 1 in the morning. So I took a job, which was influenced by my next door neighbor because they needed help. He said, "You'd be a good hand at that." So I went to work for the boot company, and it lasted 4 months, right? And the milk process wasn't making enough money for the family. And I said, "Well, I'll go to work." So I went to work for a planing mill company. We made hardwood flooring. And Granddad got me on at that place. So it didn't last very long. And I was at Brown's Drive-In one night. Brown's Drive-In is kind of like Sonic today,
Okay. Yeah.
right? But then we had actual waitress on roller skates. So car hops, they call them.
Yeah.
So I was sitting at the car hop place, and this guy drives up, and he said, "Miller, you need a job?" I said, "I could use a job." And he said, "Well, meet me up on the mountain tonight about 3 o'clock in the morning." I said, "Up on the mountain?" He said, "Yeah, there's a little church up there. You know where it is. So meet me at the church up on the mountain
At 3 in the morning.
at 3 in the morning, and I've got a job for you." I said, "Can I ask what it is?" He said, "You can, and it's running shine. Pays pretty good, but you need to meet the guy that wants you to run shine." So I go up on the mountain. I'm up there at 3 o'clock in the morning. There's nobody there but me. And that's pretty frightful when you're in them dark woods at 3 o'clock in the morning. You don't even know who you're supposed to meet. So anyway, finally this light hits me in the eyes, and he said, "Are you Miller?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I am." And he said, "Interested in running, huh?" I said, "Possibly." He said, "The boy that recommended you is part of this group, and you only come with recommendations. That's the only way we find people. So, is this your vehicle?" And I had a '53 Chevrolet. And I said, "Yep, this is it." He said, "Well, bring your vehicle up here tomorrow afternoon, leave it sitting here at the church. We'll get you all rigged up. We'll let you know when you can have it." Okay. So I leave the vehicle up there next afternoon. My brother comes, picks me up. He said, "What's the deal?" And I said, "Don't ask questions." So anyway, he kind of knows, but he doesn't ask any questions, and we go back. Well, this same guy that met me at the car hop that night, he pulls back in there and he says, "Your car's ready." Okay, I'm ready. He said, "Your first run's tonight. You leave at 2 o'clock in the morning. You got two choices. You can run to Georgia, Atlanta, or you can run to Memphis."
Well, that's a long way to get to Georgia. Well, to Atlanta. From northern Tennessee, that's a good 8 hours, right?
Yes. Yes. He said, "You run to Atlanta, or you run to Memphis. The one to Memphis pays $150 a trip. The one to Atlanta pays $75.
How much?
$150 a trip to go from Cookville to Memphis, or it pays $75 to go to Atlanta."
Well, I'd say Memphis then.
Yes, I picked Memphis. So,
And that was before you met Sheriff Pusser.
oh yeah, that was before.
Because he would have busted your ass.
Yeah, more than likely. I'd have been the one he'd confiscated on the bridge that night. But
Yeah.
anyway, Mom asked a lot of questions. Where the money's coming from? And I said, "Don't worry about it. It's honest. I'll work for it." But anyway, I was to run to Memphis, park at the hotel where he told me, leave my keys under the seat. They would take it, empty the shine, come back. There'd be a brown sack under the seat with their money in it. Make sure it's delivered.
Did you have to count the money?
No, I didn't count the money. I wasn't supposed to count it, so I was afraid to open the bag. So as long as the bag wasn't open, because it was sealed, so if the bag wasn't open, he knew nobody had been in it. So I just leave it in the seat and deliver it back at the church up on the mountain. They would get the money, fill the car up again. I'd be off and running again.
How many trips did you make?
Well, at least 4 a week.
For like, what, a year or two?
2 years.
Wow. So did you ever get pulled over?
No.
So
Never
you'd always
got
go
stopped.
the speed limit?
They had the car rigged to where when you load a car with shine, a lot of the weight will raise the front end up.
Yeah.
So they put equalizers in the springs so that the car wouldn't.
It would sit level
Right,
as you were
sit
driving
level,
it.
Right. So they had organized it where it was pretty good.
What would have happened if you'd been caught, Don?
I'd have been the clink.
For how long?
No telling. It all depends on how much shine you're running. It's by the bottle, right? For how many years you're going to do.
No shit.
Yeah. So, first of all, that's confiscated. They were taken in the sheriff's department. They would distribute it and sold it themselves. Exactly what happened. But I'd have taken that route.
Did anyone ever get busted in that group?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Several guys. But it was their own fault. They would brag about what they were doing, tell somebody, I never opened my mouth about what I was doing. They'd say, "Where are you going?" I said, "Fishing. I'll be gone for a couple of days, maybe." So my car would be loaded and I'd go and I'd never speed. We didn't have the interstate back in those days.
No? Oh, that's well. Now wait a minute. Yeah, you did. You did because we're talking 1963. If you're driving, you're 16, right?
Yeah, but we didn't run the interstate. The interstate wasn't finished from Knoxville to Nashville at that time. It was partly finished. So you'd have to get on at Lebanon, Tennessee, and run down to Nashville. And then from there on to Memphis, it was finished. But we'd always go the back roads, Highway 70s and that way.
I'd think you'd be more liable to get caught on the back roads.
Nah.
No?
No, because the moonshiners had paid most of their sheriffs off. Come to find out.
Silly me. I
Yeah.
didn't even think about the depth of the corruption.
Yeah. Yeah, they were already paid for. So they probably knew I was running shine, but they didn't care. They
didn't care.
Paid anyway, right?
That's old Don Miller out there. You
Yeah.
leave him alone.
Yeah.
He's a good boy.
53.
So you did that for a few years.
Couple of years.
So do you remember, 1963, when you're 16, that's the year that JFK got his brains reorganized down here in Dallas.
Yes. I remember that day.
Do you?
Yes.
Where were you?
I was on a laundry truck working a hotel in Sparta, Tennessee, when the news came over the radio that he had been shot in Dallas. And it was tragic to watch everybody because it was, to me, it was out in another world,
Yeah,
right?
Dallas. You'd never been to Texas by then.
No, never been to Texas. I'd never been out of Tennessee. But the thing it was like it was a distant world.
Yeah.
I'd heard of Texas, knew about Texas, but
You probably envisioned it as just being,
a gunslinging.
prairies and horses
yeah,
and...
yeah, gunslinging
Yeah.
situation. So, he got in a battle with somebody shot him.
Yeah.
But later on in life, I found out it was actually a conspiracy.
Oh, yeah.
So once I got in the entertainment field, I began to come into knowledge about how things were happening.
We're talking about presidents here, and that's besides the point.
Okay.
So, all right. So, at what point did you then start being able to play the guitar without any? Did you have to move away before you could play the guitar openly? Like when were you allowed to
When
develop?
I went to work for Red, that's when I was allowed to play.
So tell us how you got to there.
Well, Red, there's another side of the story that we got to start on the California side, because I left Tennessee after my moonshining deals and went to work for my uncle in California.
Okay, I didn't know that. So you
Okay.
you went to California, to Tennessee, and then back
Yes.
after the moonshining days
California as a child. Tennessee
as a young
my-
man.
Yeah, up to my moonshining days. After my moonshining days, I went to work for my uncle back in California, who ran a nursery, and he would do landscaping for the wealthy people over in Hollywood. So me and my cousin would go out to the desert, part of where almost to the place where I lived, Trona. We'd get big rocks out of the desert and that kind of stuff and bring them back into Hollywood and build structures for swimming pools and landscaping. And while I was there, one of the guys in Hollywood asked me if I knew anything about horses. I said, well, a little bit. I was raised with them. And he said, you strike me as a person. Do you know anything about farriers? And I said, excuse me? Because farrier and ferry, to me, was the same thing.
Awfully close.
Awful close. So I said, excuse me? And he said,
them's fighting words.
from Tennessee, they are fighting words. So he then explained a farrier is somebody that shoes horses.
Mm-hmm.
So he played the track, right? And for some reason, I guess he thought that I was a cowboy, so I should know about horses.
Did you have a hat on?
Probably. But anyway, he said, I want you to go and talk to a friend of mine over at the track. And I wasn't a very trusting person because I was from Tennessee, and you don't talk to strangers. In fact, you don't talk at all. So, but anyway, I like this guy. So we met up on Sunday and we went to the racetrack. We got over to the racetrack and he took me behind the chutes and back where the gates were. And I saw him back there shoeing horses. And he said, that's what you need to be doing. You need to be where the real money is. You don't need to be hauling rock from out in the desert doing things up. So I talked to one of the horseshoers there. And he said, yeah, I'll make good money, man. I do real good. But I'm a plater. I'm not a shoer.
A plater?
A plater. A plater is a guy that only plates race horses. He puts them on just like changing tires at a tire shop, right? A horseshoer is a specialist at what he does. He corrects the hoof. Platers don't.
Plater's just nailing it on.
Nailing it on. So he told me, he said, there's a place that they're opening up at the university over in Tucson, Arizona. And it's the University of Arizona. So contact them because they're trying to get a farrier's course going. And they need clients. So talk to them. Well, the following Sunday, I tore off for Arizona and went into the university. And Zip Peterson was the head of the...
Zip?
Zip. He was the head of the farrier science course. So when I got there and talked to the Zip, he told me, he said, we have 21 people in the class right now. And then before we can get any government assistance, we need 26. So if we can sign you up, I'm ready. So I said, what have I got to do? He said, well, you're going to have you got a high school education? I said, no. He said, you're going to have to take a GED. Mm-hmm. Pass the GED, then we can put you into college.
Did you not finish high school?
No.
Back in Tennessee?
No.
You got into Shining and just dropped out?
Well, I had to work for my family.
Yeah.
So
there was no time.
There was no time. Between farming and that kind of thing, and Mom needed help, so Dad was gone at that time. I left Tennessee because Mom and Dad weren't together anymore.
Oh, okay.
Right? She needed some help. That's the reason I started running moonshine, because Dad was gone. And we was living not in Granddaddy's house, but in Mom's house at that time. So anyway, I go over and Zip says, yeah, we'll enroll you. Take this GED course. So I took the GED, passed it, went on in to the university.
You passed?
I passed. Can you believe that? It's hard for me to believe.
Had to do that reading, writing, comprehension.
Either I passed or they cheated, one or the other. But they told me I passed. So anyway, they introduced me into the farrier science field. So I took that course. I came out of the University of Arizona. In the meantime, while I was taking my course there, I worked in a panty factory.
A panty factory?
Women's panties. I was a cutter for the material to make the panties.
Okay.
And I got a whole lot of riff off of that, but
hey, whatever. Job's a job.
Right. Job's a job. It helped me get through college. So after I finished that, I decided, okay, I'm going back to Tennessee and open my own business as a farrier. So I get back to Tennessee, and those farmers, they're not much on paying a guy to shoe their horses.
Uh-huh.
So they looked at me a little strange. You mean you got a degree in this? My granddaddy did that years ago, boy. He didn't have a degree. So anyway, I wound up in Kentucky looking for work because I was starving to death. In fact, I was cutting firewood and selling it in Nashville in order to make a living. So I'd haul firewood in Nashville and sell it.
That ain't much of a living, huh?
No, $12 a rick. So at that time. And let me tell you what, Time you clear the brush and everything off of a rick, you're wore out.
Oh yeah.
So you hoped somebody was going to buy that rick. You didn't have a prospect. You just went and sat on the street until you sold it.
Man.
Kind of like watermelons, right? So anyway, I made enough money off the wood that got enough money to go to Kentucky, where the real race horses are. So I thought, all right, I went up to Kentucky. I go into Crabtree Farms, which is one of the, I had a 49 Ford pickup truck at this time, right? With my own hand-built canopy on the back. And my little forge and anvil and all of that. So I pull up to Crabtree Farms, which looks like you're driving up the street to the White House, right? And I pull up there, and this barn looks like a cave. It's so huge. When you're looking down the hallway, somebody your size would look like a midget at the other end, right? So I start down the hallway. Well, this black guy stops me. No, sir, not through here, not through here. If you're going to go down there, you need to go around. Well, around that barn is way down through there because it got stud runs that runs off 3 acres down that way, right? And you got to go all the way around that stud pen to get back here. Because at the other end of that barn was a farrier, and I'm going to talk to him, right? So he had his rig backed up. I get up there to find out he's one of the instructors that Zip Peterson brought in out at the University of Arizona. His name is Don Canfield. Very, very notorious. You can look him up on the website. And anyway, Canfield recognizes, he don't recognize me as me, he recognized me as one of his students, right? He said, I know you. I said, yeah, you do. In fact, she was one of my instructors. He said, what are you doing up here? I said, I'm looking for work. He laughed. He said, really? I said, yeah. He said, you see this mare right here? I said, yeah. $360,000 is what she's worth. Are you qualified to put shoes on her? I don't think so. You don't have the basics. You only have the basics. You don't have the experience. So, you're not qualified to shoot this kind of horses. You have no business being up here looking for work because you're still not qualified. You haven't worked for a major farrier. You don't even know that much about the anatomy.
This guy sounds like a horrible teacher, by the way, Don.
He's a great teacher.
Well, he's sure different outside of the classroom.
Yes. The classroom was money to him. I was money to him. I looked at him and I said, you're for real. And he said, are you for real looking for work? I said, yes, I am.
I got my truck out there.
I got my truck out there. He said, that's what you're driving? I said, yeah. He said, you need to get that thing gone. He had one of these show rigs, right? Air conditioning, long trailer. His hammer was chrome plated. His anvil was chrome plated. He had his name written on it like artists do in country music. Don Canfield, farrier. Don't goof with the hoof.
Oh my gosh.
Right? So, I said, what I need to do? You need to find somebody to go to work for. Where will I find those people? He said, I don't know. I said, look, this is one of the situations is, you're qualified,
but you don't have any experience.
You need to go get some experience.
That's right.
So I said, where do you go get the experience?
Mm-hmm.
He said, I don't know. You just have to find somebody.
You just have to find it.
So I said, all right, how about you? He said, I don't use apprentices. Period. I don't have time for apprentice. And I said, all right. How am I to get to know what you know if I never have anybody to teach me? That you've already supposed to taught me.
That's right.
So I feel like on my behalf that you took my money and cheated me.
That's exactly what I would have said.
So on my behalf, I think you owe me an explanation or at least a shot at something to where I can overcome this problem I have where I don't have any income. That I spend all the money and work to get to do what you're doing. So he said, it's about lunchtime. Meet me down here at the store in a little bit. There's a store right down there. You get that rig, get on down there at the store, and I'll come down there. So he comes down to the store. We have another conversation. He said, all right, you tell me you're interested in learning shoeing. I said, yes, I am. He said, to what point? I'm going to find out how interested you are. You can take it or leave it. I don't care. Because you're the ones needing help, not me.
Mm-hmm.
He said, if you want to go with me on my projects as far as farrier, he said, here's the deal I'll make you. Earn what you learn. Be at my house at 7 o'clock in the morning, and it's a 5-year apprenticeship.
Earn what you learn. That means he's not going to pay you?
Not going to pay me a dime. You earn what you learn. It's a 5-year apprenticeship. Take it or leave it. I said, let me think about this. So I go home.
5 years without pay?
I'm married, right?
This is insane, Don.
So I go home, and I tell the wife. I said, got a job offer, but you're going to think it's not a job offer. You're going to think the same thing I think. How in the hell are we going to make it? Because Don Canfield, one of the greatest farriers in the entire world. At that time, Don shod for Budweiser. They'd fly him overseas. He was the only guy that knew how to take the hoof off, repair the damage to the inner part of the hoof, put it back on, and the horse be sound. And not only that, he had a complete distribution for all the farrier tools. He had his own Learjet.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't know this until after I went to work for him. But he was an aeronautical engineer.
Mm-hmm.
And he shot horses. So does that tell you what horseshoeing's worth?
Mm.
Right? But he knew steel. He knew metal. He knew how to bend it. He knew what it'd take. He knew what it took to crush it. So he knew that along with the leverage of the hoof and the weight of the amount of weight that he was putting on a horse, on a racehorse, in order to get him across that finish line the quickest.
So did you?
So
what the
anyway,
wife say?
I told the wife.
Yeah.
So next morning at 7:30, I was at his house.
You took it?
I took it.
And did you tell her? You were already married?
Yes. And
is
she said,
this to the lady you're married to now, or
no,
this is
no,
first
this
wife?
is my first wife.
Okay.
So anyway,
Guess we skipped over the marriage part.
Yeah. I'm married in California.
I'm just talking about the important parts. Keep going.
Okay. But anyway, I worked for him 4.5 years, and he decided he was going to quit. So at the end of that, I wound up with all of his business because he gave me
All his
of
contacts.
clients.
Yeah.
Right. Because they knew me anyway.
But he didn't pay you a penny all
No.
that time?
Never a penny.
Was
Never
he
a penny.
nice to you?
He was. I can't say he was. He was strict, like my granddad, on what I needed to do in order to make things work. Right. He taught me a lot of things about the anatomy of the hoof and leg, but where I made my money was Dr. Insminger from Cornell University, which Don worked for. Dr. Insminger stepped in and he said, everything that Canfield's taken care of on the weekends, we're going to give to you. So we're going to pay you for trimming these horses and shoeing them. And we're going to take that away from Canfield because we can use him in the teaching class.
So now we're talking what, like 1971 or two?
We're talking 71.
And
So,
what were you making a year? Like, how much was a lot of money back then?
back in 71?
Yeah.
Well, Canfield was making over 300,000 a year.
Okay, that's a lot even today.
Right, that's a lot.
But how much did they pay you?
Nothing.
No, I mean when you took over his book of
Insminger,
business. Yeah.
It was $4 a horse, but he had 300 head, so I could work all day.
So was $1,200 a year a lot of money back then?
$1,200 a year was a lot of money. I mean, it wasn't a great amount of money, but $1,200 a year when you had a full-time job, right? That was what was important. But I got to eat. They furnished my meals. They furnished my housing. So I didn't have any expenses.
So you and the wife lived on
Separate.
on their property?
No, the wife stayed in Murfreesboro in Lebanon, Tennessee. And I'd go to Cornell, which is in New York.
Oh, you were way up there doing that. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So I'd go there, and Dr. Insminger would make sure that I had plenty of benefits, that I would stay with Canfield. So Dr. Insminger was my leaning post.
Mm.
And Dr. Insminger had a lot of influence with Canfield because Canfield worked for the university.
Well, that guy sounded like a bit of a dick, but how does this tie back in you meeting Johnny Duncan?
Well,
Is that was how it tied back into you getting into country music?
yes. Because I went out on my own after Canfield left. I went out on my own, which was a lot of his clients, right? I had. And I began to pick up some of the Nashville people that word of mouth, Boots Randolph, Loretta Lynn, Johnny Cash, other people that I'd go to shoeing for. So Red Stegall moved in from California right down the road from my blacksmith shop. And he stopped in the blacksmith shop because his wife was into horses. And she was into endurance riding, which was across country. So he said, they tell me you're one of the best horseshoers in the country. I said, well, I don't know about that, but I think we can handle what you got. And he said, well, my wife's bringing her horses in from California, and when they get here, they're going to need to be shod because she's got a cross-country race starting in Alabama and going down to Georgia or somewhere that she's riding cross-country, and her horses need to be shod. So how about setting up a date so when she gets in here that we can get them done? Fine. Set it up to date. That's the first time I met Red. Didn't know who he was.
So through is it ferrying?
Well, it's farrier. Just farrier.
So what's like through being a farrier,
Right.
You met all these famous music contacts.
Yes. Boots Randolph, starting with Boots Randolph. He was my first client in the celebrity field, right? Then Loretta Lynn had a Western store and a rodeo company. So her head honcho at the rodeo company wanted me to shoe his horses for her, which was Loretta Lynn's, I guess you'd have to say, manager of the rodeo association. Then, being that I met him, he had contacts with all the people that she knew, and word of mouth from him got me.
So you're getting all the high-end, top-dollar clients.
Yes.
Because you went 4.5 years.
Yes.
Where
with no
earn what you learn.
Right.
So
right.
pay. So because of that investment.
Well, it took off 40 years of my life. It would have taken me 40 years on my own to learn
to get there.
Canfield.
That's right. But it got you into the music field.
Right.
So were you shoeing Red Stegall's
Yes.
wife's horse, and then
Yes.
and then somehow you said you want to hear me play a tune, or
No.
like what? How'd it go?
No, never that much. No, I never even taught music.
You threw a cow chip at him.
We became friends. So He'd come into town from out here in Texas. He'd come into town because he played some places out here in Texas, and he was trying to get a deal on a label there. And we became friends. And he said, if I ever get a band together, I want you to work for me. I said, yeah, you and about 16 others. So when that happens, let me know, right?
Just facetiously, or
Yes. I was passing it off because you hear that all the time.
sure, yeah.
Right?
What are you gonna do?
Yeah, what am I going to do? I'm a horseshoer, so you don't ride to a gig, you know. So how can I help you, man? But he saw something that I guess he liked about my attitude and my drive, that he felt like that he had a position in his mind for me, which was, he didn't know probably at the time what it would be, but he liked me well enough to say, I'm going to give you a job if I get a deal. Well, he got a deal. And sure enough, he called me.